So I'm so excited to be in San Diego, and we've been stalking each other on LinkedIn for a while.
True story. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just interested to get to know you, to get your views on customer experience in the United States. We've both got the certification from the CXPA, and I'm just eager to learn and to hear what you're up to.
I'm excited you came all the way to San Diego. This is perfect. So what do you want to know?
So, I mean, you know, coming from South Africa, you know, we've learned a lot from you. I've learned a lot from Lou Carbone and Bruce Temkin. They've really informed the work I do. And we see companies putting more effort, paying more attention to customer experience. What is your views on what that looks like here in the States?
So I think the divide between companies that really get customer experience and execute on it and the rest of the world is getting, and by rest of the world I mean the rest of the companies in the United States, it's growing wider. So many companies say they're customer focused, but you look at their actions and they're focused on short-term profits, not long-term value creation, long-term relationships, long-term experience. So I think there's a little bit of a facade that customer experience is as well adopted as people like to think it is.
Yeah. I had a discussion with Diane Majors about, you know, the decision making when executives choose partners to help them with CX transformation, kind of knowing the real transformation, real appetite for change versus, you know, doing it because it sounds good or it looks great on a board report. What are you seeing in terms of kind of distinguishing what's real, what's, you know?
That's a tough one. It varies so much by executive. So many of them will get wrapped into the idea of it and then they just won't follow through. So they might be fully behind initiatives for 3 months maybe, and then some priority comes and they'll pull all the resources into the next fire drill.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a company a couple of weeks ago and I told them, I said, sometimes you have to let a couple of your fires burn so that you can focus and invest on that long-term strategy. Otherwise, you will always be firefighting.
Yeah.
You'll never leapfrog it into what your strategic destination is, or at least what you want it to be. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. But I think that as a profession, we will make more progress faster when more practitioners focus on quantifiable benefits.
Yeah.
I love that Gene Bliss talks about earning the right to have your customers and to have them spend money, to see them as assets. And I think as practitioners, we need to do the same with a company, and the champions within the company need to do the same. They need those short-term wins to earn the right to make an even bigger impact on customer experience within a company and their culture. And I think that is the key, is that quantifiable piece. Otherwise, it stays in that touchy-feely, we're making things better, but nobody can measure it, but we're pretty sure it's making a difference on our business, and that isn't sustainable. You'll lose the buy-in faster than you can imagine.
Yeah, and your approach to the more pragmatic side, because I see in South Africa, a lot of practitioners are very theoretical and, you know, very kind of smart sounding, but often the deliverables that I see is not in a state where you can implement it.
Yeah, one of my colleagues is always referring to, I believe in practical. If it's not practical, if we can't execute on it, let's not talk about it. We need to talk about what we can do today, what's reasonable, what's practical with the resources that we have and or the resources that we can get, being creative, but let's not live in the world of theory, because that's not going to get us anywhere. And then as you pick up momentum and you make changes, then you can find more money to do more creative, more transformational things.
Yeah. And you know, we find a lot of CX leaders have a day job and then they have the CX portfolio. Is that something that you seeing here, or do you think the role of CXO is being taken seriously?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. Again, I would say there are a few companies where they take the role of CX very, very seriously. So when they hire it, that person has an equal voice at the table of leadership. I've kind of taken a different tactic. I consider myself to be an executive strategist to the C-suite who happens to use the lens of the customer as one of the primary ways that I develop and execute strategy. And by doing it that way, I have found that for many leaders, it's more relatable when I'm talking about this is the strategy we're going to take to grow revenue, reduce costs, expand wallet share. And yes, we're looking at it through the lens of the ultimate impact on the customer as one of the primary lenses.
Yeah.
And I feel like in this day and age, they can hear that more consistently than when you start with the customer experience. And so many just think of that as that touchy-feely, and they go to the Zappos, Amazon, Southwest Airlines, and they think, oh, that's so lovely, but we can't be them. And they're right, they can't.
Yeah.
And so bringing it back to that practical, tangible, using language that they're comfortable with.
I had someone call me 2 weeks ago and they said, can you help us with a customer experience strategy? And I said, well, just tell me what is that for you? And the person on the other side of the line said, well, my boss said we need a customer experience strategy document. And I said, well, just take a few steps back and tell me what you want to achieve. And I think that's what I love about what you said is you drive strategy from a customer viewpoint, not make it a layer on top of dysfunctionality that exists in the organization.
Yeah, when you do that, it's the layer, then peel it off because maybe it'll be less expensive then.
Yeah.
Whereas you just have to saturate it into what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I laughed when you said that about the prepare me a document I get more customers who say, okay, what's going to be in the strategy document? Like, okay, just so you understand, the process of getting to that document is where the value is. That document just codifies it so you have something to refer to. It's a living document, but it's like they think that once you have the document, now you can say, see, we do customer experience. It's like, that's not really going to get you there.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot. People are almost like junkies over data, voice of the customer. I need a strategy document. I need to report in my board pack on client centricity, and it's more about legitimizing the fact that we are customer focused and that my role is important. And I think that's why these artifacts become so important.
They're almost idolized.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of the other side of, when I said that you need to focus on it being quantifiable, is that people then decide, okay, let's spend all our time in the data. And I always tell them, no. Let's go with order of magnitude quantifiable so that you have some numbers to say, okay, if we invest this, we're going to get twofold return. We're going to, lose less customers, whatever that may be. But don't spend all of the money or the savings that you would get on getting down to the minutia of, okay, we're going to, reduce a penny off of every customer's transaction. By then, you've just now eaten up everything that you would have saved. Yeah. And for the most part, you don't need to get into that science for customer experience transformation. Yeah. It's not to say it's never valuable, but that's just not where I would spend my focus.
Yeah. I was at a conference last week and I moderated a panel, and there was a lot of questions from the audience. We had a screen running up with all of their questions, and a lot of questions about structure. Where in the organization should CX report into? And it was very interesting for me, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are around people being so obsessed about structure, hierarchy. Where does it fit? Where does it report into? Tell me what your...
I have a very strong opinion, as many people do. I believe wholeheartedly, 100%, that the customer experience strategy role must be owned by someone who reports to the CEO or the president, whoever is the most day-to-day involved in the business. It cannot sit in sales, in marketing, in delivery, because the moment that you do that, now customer experience is equated with sales or marketing or delivery, when it has to be all of that plus operations. in some industries I've read that the number two, or the second most highest number of touches with a customer are actually in finance, in accounts receivable, in some industries.
Yeah.
And so if that's a horrible experience, and you haven't addressed that because you're thinking, okay, marketing.
Yeah.
And you probably see that the biggest gaps between customer experience and what our brand, what we say it is, and what we deliver is one of the biggest gaps. And so if you set it in marketing or sales, but you're not delivering, then who cares? I mean,
absolutely.
You'll get a lot of customers' attention and then lose them.
Yeah.
Just as quickly.
Yeah. Often, and you're right about finance. Often when we map the journeys and we even look at, a payment that would go off the customer's bank account and what that payment says, and what the brand, because usually it's this code that makes no sense,
Yep.
and most customers, if they can't relate the amount to what the service is for, that they actually wouldn't know just by looking at the codes where that payment is from. And you're right. That's the only thing they see is the deductible from their bank account.
Or the returns process, if they can't ever see where it is and when to expect a credit.
Yeah.
But the invoicing one is funny. I had a customer who they work with franchises. And so they would send an invoice for every franchise location. So some franchise companies, they have thousands of locations. But corporate's paying the invoice. So now they're having to pay, all these separate invoices. So then what does the company do? They change it. Now it's all their franchises get the invoices at the summary level. But some franchise companies are sending the invoices out to their franchises. So now they've got to break down the invoice to send it to each of their franchise locations to pay. And it's because it was the one size fits all, not we have different types of customers who have different types of setups. And they just didn't understand the pain until we talked to the customers and said, how much money do you spend, or how much time do you spend a month reconciling these to get them paid?
Yeah.
It was obscene.
Yeah. Now you talked about the case studies of Zappos, Amazon, Southwest Airlines, and I think however inspiring they are, I'm seeing a lot of my clients saying, but we'll never be a Zappos. We can't re-architect who we are. Some of my clients have existed for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
What is your? I mean, is there someone that's not that prominent that you admire, that you?
There are a lot of small businesses that I really admire that really get it. One is the dealership that I go to for my oil changes and all of that. I switched from a different dealership because the experience was wretched. I went to another one, I've been going for years. It's 30 minutes further away. It's delightful every time I go, and I do not throw that term around lightly. It is fabulous. They go above and beyond, and I love going, which I don't know, that sounds probably a little bit too much, but they just take such good care of me that I really enjoy the experience, whereas before I would always leave fuming. Even if the service was good, they found a way to irritate me. But I think there's things to be learned and extracted from Zappos and Southwest, but the problem is we can't envision ourselves being like them, so this is a horrible example, but I'll use it anyways. If someone's going through a transformation of, their physical self, and you say, okay, I don't know, Tyra Banks or Christy Brinkley, or now I've just dated myself and people are like, you are not young and hip, which I'm not. And that's what you aspire.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel possible. Whereas if you pick these interim role models and that's a nice goal out there, but I'm going to have one here to focus on. It just feels so much easier to stay inspired because you see that, oh wow, there's benefits along the journey. If we just take this step, we're going to experience positive returns and our employees are going to feel better. And then if we take the next step, rather than thinking that, 2, 3, 5 years out is when all of the benefit is just going to be unveiled.
Yeah.
And that's not how it is. It should be beneficial along the way.
Absolutely. And as you said, those small pragmatic wins without falling into that trap of just, fixing stuff. I think early, we often, as CX professionals, we like to talk about the things we do right, but we don't nearly enough talk about our failures. And I think one of the early on in my role as a CX transformist, I fell into that trap of being the fix-it person, and you kind of attract everything that's wrong in the organization.
Yeah, you have to clean up.
You know, and then you never get into innovative design because you're just fixing everything that's wrong. If you had to think about maybe some of your failures that you feel comfortable sharing.
I would say one of the biggest ones, and I was actually having this conversation with someone the other week, when customers push back, so clients that we're working with on their customer's journey, and they say, well, we just want to map a generic journey, or we just want to ... And too many times I agreed to whatever their parameters were. In the back of my mind, kind of it gnawing at me that I knew they wouldn't get the value, but thinking, they might get some, when really I should have said, you will not get the value that you need. It's either this way, or I'm not interested in participating because you're not going to get what you need.
Yeah.
And I would say that's probably one of the biggest ones, especially regarding journey mapping, because there's way too many shortcuts, and any of those shortcuts diminish the value 100-fold.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd say that is one of the biggest ones. And then the other is helping companies to see really balancing the quick wins and then the high impact, high effort, transformative, innovative initiatives, and getting separate groups of people driving down each of those tracks so that you don't lose focus on either one.
Yeah.
And hopefully the quick wins are inspiring this team to keep going. And sometimes you cross-pollinate team members because it's kind of fun to see the immediate results and to do that, but you've got to do both, because if you focus on just the quick wins, this stuff's going to take a while.
Yeah.
The longer you put it off, the further behind you're getting.
Yeah.
But this stuff should energize you to say, see, we're making progress, while you're chugging away on that more grandiose and more impactful vision.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think getting to that prioritization of what do you do first?
Yeah, prioritize and focus is. I tell my customers when I use that phrase, I say, you're going to get sick of me saying it because I'm going to say it all the time. You must prioritize and focus. Otherwise, you're going to read an article tomorrow morning and say, Jessica, what if we do the thing because, and then you lost focus.
Yeah.
And then the next day it's going to be something else.
Yeah.
Now, that said, you have to balance that with whatever your roadmap is. It's not, you don't put it on a shelf and then or use it as the Bible for the next 10 years. It should be a living document, but that's a discipline, not a manic. I heard from someone, I met someone, I listened to a podcast, and let's shift gears, because we all know that won't get us anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the things I found, I was at a conference in Rwanda, and literally everyone that spoke about customer experience had done the work themselves. So I think they're sitting in a situation where they don't have access to consultants, they don't have the kind of budgets that we see in South Africa, and they were talking firsthand of what they've done, and it was just very practical and very real. Mm-hmm. And I was really, really impressed. I think once you travel as much as what I do and go to conferences, it's kind of hard to be impressed.
Right. Yeah.
So that was a really interesting experience, going to a place where they're so pragmatic and they're so passionate about doing it themselves.
And they have done so many different things with their country so well, like healthcare and things like that, where just that dig in, we're going to get it done and figure it out with logic. Yeah. Go figure, logic. Yeah. Rather than all these fancy tools.
Yeah.
And their progress is phenomenal. And that country, I think that's partly why I love mentoring the gals from there, because I always get way more from them than they probably get from me.
Yes.
Because they just dig in, look at, okay, what is the problem and how do we fix it? And they don't go back to the big theoretical books or the certifications or the education. they just use common sense, which we know isn't that common, but I'm always inspired by them.
Yeah. I want to just for a moment go back to the kind of the journey mapping discussion we had. What I started doing now is I almost won't take work on unless we do design with customers of the brand. And I think, like you, I've become a lot more confident and a lot more assertive when I advise customers, and often when they want to try and push things in one direction, if we do the design with their customers, we just find opportunities that they never existed, and what they thought was important is not important. Maybe just to hear your views on what you found and kind of.
So absolutely, if customers aren't going to be there, I'm not doing it. And one of the techniques that I've used to help the C-suite realize the value of having the customer participate is I'll let them know, let's just schedule a couple of quick conversations with customers and ask them for feedback on their experience. Just, pre-schedule, ask them if they're willing to spend 30 minutes with us, and that they are going to be on speakerphone, and hopefully that's okay, and that you're going to have the C-suite in the room, because I want them to hear it real time.
Yeah.
And I tell them I want them to schedule customers that they think they're phenomenal, and some customers that they're struggling with.
Yeah.
And I will usually facilitate the conversation, and I tell the C-suite, if you aren't surprised, if not shocked by what you hear from the customers, then we'll do the journey mapping and they don't need to be in the room. Because usually they've told me, but we know our customers, we talk to them all the time. Yes, talking to them when they call you and say this isn't going well, and then you say fix it to your team and then they fix it, is not knowing your customers. I mean, you ask a couple questions like, okay, well, tell me about your customers. Well, we have a lot of them, and I saw one last week, and tell me about your customers. Are they, businesses? Are they people? Are they older, younger? And they're like, well, the one, and then the one before.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not the same thing. And one of my favorite calls that was a jaw-dropping moment is we were talking, it was a distribution company, and they'd scheduled a call with a customer that they believed they had a phenomenal relationship with. And we asked a number of questions, and we learned quite a few things, but one of the questions I asked the customer is, if you could summarize the experience in, 1, 2, 3 words, how would you encapsulate your overall experience with this company? And this customer, who's tried really hard to be as flattering but honest about this company, because they know the C-suite's in the room and they have a long relationship with them, they said, they try. I don't know that that's a resounding endorsement of a phenomenal experience when they say they try. Yeah. And so if another business pops up down the street that does it, and they try and they're successful. Yeah. And so when we debriefed on that, the leaders were shocked is probably not quite the right word. Yeah. They were a little appalled, because they're thinking, we tried. I had another company, we did something similar, and the customers said, oh, we love them because they credit us for everything when they do it wrong all the time. Also not sustainable. Yeah. You're losing money right and left because you're causing problems, every other order, and then just writing it off. Yeah. No wonder you're bleeding. Yeah. Also not a resounding endorsement. Oh, they give me lots of stuff for free, so they're not making any money. Yeah. So it's conversations like that get the buy-in to say they must be in the room.
Yeah, and feel it under their skins. If they don't feel the pain, you're not going to see.
You've got to have a face to it. Yeah. I had a customer experience, a newer resource who's in a customer experience role, but admittedly this is their first time in the role, and so they're continually seeking out advice and kind of that apprenticeship. And their boss said they want some journey maps and told her to go make some. So she told me, do you have a template so I can go make some tonight? I'm like, well, you could, but it's a participative experience. Yeah. The output is a fractional piece of the value. It's bringing everyone along on the journey of building these. and what they learn going through it, that is the key. So you populating a template and saying, okay, this is the journey, or this is the journey what we want it to be, I mean, that's worth the time you spent on it, probably less.
Yeah. I was working with a client probably 2 weeks ago, and with the Lego, I asked them to build the story of the customer, and when they described the customer, they said, my customer, and we try and make it tangible, give the customer names.
Mm-hmm.
No, my customer's Sally, and she's 25 to 35 years old. I said, how's that possible? and I think this, I said, yeah. I'd love to be 25 to 35 years old. And I think this thing about segmentation versus make it like real, make it tangible.
I remember when I was first getting into customer experience, and the person who really invested a lot in me, we were talking about personas, and I really struggled with the creativity around it. And so I was probably that person who was like, I don't know, Sally, whatever. I probably said 25 to 55. And I just would make him so vague. And he's like, well, what does she like to do after work? I'm like, I don't know. Who cares? He's like, well, like maybe some yoga and Trader Joe's for the grocery store. I'm thinking, who cares? This does not matter. And then as I spent more time using personas, the more that it became a person in the room, the more powerful it was. And this is I think I just got goosebumps about to tell this story. I had a customer, and we spent a lot of time on personas and journey mapping. And the one persona that mapped to the journey that they were really struggling with, I never forget when I came back in to help them with kind of the next stage of their transformation. They were talking about Sally, and Sally's the persona, but they're talking about her in the conversation like she's a person. And I hadn't been, this was 3 months ago. And so they actually have Sally in the room at all their meetings, in theory, and they just talk about Sally. And so I'll never forget, they had a salesperson talking about a sales process and how they were going to get quotes back to a customer. And there's a quiet guy in the room who's in finance, and he keeps trying to chime in, but the big abrasive salespeople are talking over him. Yeah. And this goes on for a while, and all of a sudden, it's a true story, I wish I would have videotaped it, the finance guy slams his fist onto the table and says, but what about Sally? He's like, she's not going to like this at all. And my heart was doing leaps, and I'm like, I'm so proud of my young children in the customer experience world. But they had built her into a person, could feel the fact that she's going crazy. So the salespeople love this new potential process, but here's our poor Sally who is gonna hate it. And I was like, that is the purpose of a persona.
Priceless.
Yeah,
Priceless. Oh, that's amazing. That just shows you've kind of made it. You've made a tangible shift.
It's just now they actually have the customer in the room. Yeah. When they, always bring Sally, to every conversation. And that is really one of the most important things, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but one of the things I find to be the most difficult hurdles to get over is when you're working with the team that's customer facing and you start talking about how you're going to improve customer experience. So often they view the experience that their customers are having through the lens of how hard they are personally trying to deliver a great experience. So telling them that it's a horrible experience is not something that they can hear, because they know they're blood, sweat, and tears, and they're the ones keeping cool and being nice and running around the building trying to get answers for their customers. They're doing everything and then some. And so finding ways to let them know, we have the people part shored up. We don't have the process and the technology shored up. Yeah. That's the problem. Yeah. Or it's the policies and procedures getting in the way, because that is one of the most painful things, is when you're talking to those people, because usually it's on their backs that customers are staying at all. Yeah.
We've done, I think, 1 or 2 audits, kind of experience audits for clients, and sometimes I'd be so shocked that they never invite us back because they cannot believe what they found. And we had one customer. We played it back to the leadership team, and it was an Italian woman that was kind of the sponsor of this initiative. And she sat back and she folded her arms and she said, "I never ever want to see you people again." And she was so horrified. I said, "Listen, you can shoot the messenger," and I said, "We'll go away, but your problems are not going to go away unless you act." I said, it's not fluke. It's not the things we found. Is like real experiences my team had, and we just played it back. And that they were in hospitality, and I think some companies that are not paying attention to those things will just become irrelevant so quickly.
Yeah, I was working with a bank, and they had brought in all their leadership for just an annual meeting, and they had started doing some customer experience exercises internally, and so they'd captured verbatims, which I'm a very big fan of verbatims, because like you said, you can shoot the messenger, but I didn't say these 20 different exact phrases of "I wish you'd fall off a bridge" or "drown" or whatever it is. And it was, so they have everyone in a room similar to this room, and they've decided to pass out the verbatims to people in the room in an envelope, and they're going to have them just stand and read them. And this was unplanned, but as they're standing up reading them, they're glowing. I mean, it's an amazing one. And so you'd think this was like a rally, and everyone's getting really excited. Well, I guess we didn't shuffle the deck, because all of a sudden, then you get the bad ones. And it was literally, the great ones are first, and then "I would never work with you again. You ruined my the process of purchasing my first home." And they're just getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And you just feel the room sink. If I had it to do over again, I'd probably engineer it to be that way, because then the message is, why is it so inconsistent? You have somebody who says you made their life amazing, you got them their dream home, and then you have people who are wishing harm on your family. and that reliability. Someone was once telling me they call it an "it depends" experience. It depends on which location, which person you talk to, which day of the week, the weather. Depends if it's going to be great. And using that to say, okay, take the best of those, and how do we make that a consistent experience? And I think that's an important message. And then it takes it away from, okay, frontline person, it's a you problem. No, you're probably what's amazing. Now let's figure out, how do we institutionalize that?
Oh, those are lovely practical things. I love that idea of handing out the verbatims, and even strategically placing them. So.
And we didn't. It was just one of those moments where you're like, well, that worked out perfectly. The palpable feeling in the room. Because these are all the leaders from all over the country. They probably only get together once a year.
And people are disconnected with what's going on out there. And it's sometimes you just need to connect them enough to get them to act. It feels like I've known you my whole life.
I know it does.
It's amazing that we can. I mean, I don't know. 50 years ago, this wouldn't have been possible.
I was talking to my mom earlier today, and she was asking me what I was doing, and I told her, I'm like, well, I'm gonna go hang out with someone that I met on LinkedIn, and I've done that a couple times with people on LinkedIn or even Twitter. And I told her, I said, if you'd have told me I was gonna do that 4 years ago, I'd have said, not happening. I am not like the creepy online dating person, which it's not creepy, but if you'd asked me 4 years ago, that's exactly what I'd been like, no. But it is it's the lifestyle, and I really feel very connected to people like you and Ian. I've never met Ian, but I just feel very connected. And the people that I've met in person, like Jean Bliss or Bruce Temkin, it feels instantaneously like I've known him forever, partly because we've lived a lot of the same pains. We've had a lot of similar customers, or we've made a lot of the same mistakes.
I'm so glad you agreed to this date. It's lovely doing online dating with you.
It's my pleasure. I loved your profile. And I love long walks on the beach.
Excellent.